and how we as a people, despite, as you said, Auntie, the potential of us being lost to time because of illness and disease, have managed to overcome and still exist as a people. And not just for ourselves, but also for a global community that I think is beginning to understand the importance of Allah. And so I come to you today, and thank you, Emily, for the invitation. In great respect to the kupuna, our elders, who, like Sensei Sean, at some point saw something in this empty coconut and decided that they wanted to put something in it. And so I was very fortunate to have been among numerous elders, wisdom keepers, who felt it important to share their information, their knowledge, their ike, their wisdom with me. But equally important to give me permission and direction to at some point in time to share that. And so I say the sharing here because similarly, I was fortunate to be mentored by kupuna, or elders of various disciplines. And today I'm the kiai, the kahu, the keeper of some of these traditions, and have the responsibility of not only sharing, but also protecting, including this warrior art called lua, which is about protection and not just about fighting. But I will echo what has already been said by suggesting that regardless of what the discipline may have been, there was always a spiritual component to it, which may be different than the religious practice. And I like to qualify that by simply saying that on one hand, we may define, or some of us will define religion as the mechanics, the methods, the practices, while the spiritual side is really the meaning. So there's mechanics and then there's meaning. And what we've heard today is the expression of meaning. That a person in a contemporary space, a doctor of orthopedics, he or she may say a prayer before they work on their patient. But I'd submit that that prayer is not part of their discipline, but their personal preference towards their spirituality and religion. Where in our practices, regardless of what it was, there was puli, there was prayer, there was acknowledgement of something larger, that we were part of something. And they were always engaged in that practice of spirituality. And it may have taken different forms. But it's also important to note that we live in a time of competitiveness, competition. And while we share today, each of us may have come from different kupuna, or elders, and traditions. Each island, as Kahu Kalaniu said, contextual. Under one moon, you do something. On another moon, something else. On another island, same moon, you may do something different. This is what we call punno, the appropriateness and correctness for that place and that time. That is this notion of relationship to place and to one another. And our spiritual practices is one acknowledging that relationship, which is difficult, as we've heard today, of how to translate into a time today that Kalani was talking about, where so much of how we engage the world is transactional. It's about how much, rather than coming from a world that says how well. How well do you do, not how much do you do. And these are different levels of measurement and metric. And so what I'd like to offer, staying in consistency, in alignment with this discussion of spirituality, religion, and healing, not fixing. Both Auntie Verna and Sensei Sean mentioned Ho'oponopono. Like them, I was fortunate, Sean, to be mentored by Auntie Morna Nalamoku Simeona. And it is through that practice of Ho'oponopono. Then at Pipilai Baki, who was the one that grabbed me on the left ear, but Papa Laime was grabbing me on the right ear. And it is through multiple traditions and thought. So I come to this space now in the spirit of aloha, of giving and receiving, of making whole and making right. And in a practice in the spirit of Ho'oponopono, to make it right and correct. So allow me to just say this. On behalf of my ancestors and myself and my family, I ask each of you in the room to please forgive us for anything that we may have done in time, intentionally or unintentionally, in word, deed, or action, or maybe inaction, that has created a condition in your life and your lives that brought us all together to this day, today, in this room, in this now, so that we can share this experience with one another. Please forgive us for whatever that was, for any heva, discord, pilikia, problems, eha, pain in your life that we may have caused. Please forgive us. Ho'ohuli, you turn it around and say, in that same spirit of Allah and Ho'oponopono, my ancestors and I forgive you and your ancestors for anything that you may have done to create all these conditions that have been brought up that continue to add and support this multi-generational, intergenerational trauma that has impacted us as people, our land, and our relatives. And when I say relatives, I mean the waters, the animals, the creatures in the air and in the sea. We're all related. For whatever it is that you may have done, intentionally or unintentionally, at this moment, we forgive you in the spirit of Rupa and Ho'oponopono. I engage in this experience and sharing because in order for us to overcome, to move forward, as Emily said, we have to acknowledge the pilikia before we can clean it, before we can let it go. We have to acknowledge it. And we have to accept also that we are the product of all of that. Good, bad, or indifferent. I am the collective of my ancestors, their practices, everything. And so I cannot be selective about that part of my culture or my history that feels good. I have to acknowledge it all because that's who I am. That's why we're here. Regardless of what my ancestors may have done, that is who I have become today. That's how each of us are. It is in spaces like this that we can begin to understand that we are all connected. It speaks to the idea that we unify mind, body, and spirit. We nurture and care for that unification through all time. It acknowledges that we're all connected. We may come from different places, but it's all the same place. Papa Honua. It is Mother Earth.